At 4:43 in the morning, the North Valley Bus Depot belonged to fluorescent light, diesel fumes, and people who were too tired to make eye contact. It sat on the edge of town where the old rail yards had once been, a long, low building of concrete, glass, and patched roofing, with 6 covered platforms stretching out beside it like ribs. By day, the depot looked merely worn. By pre-dawn, it looked almost unreal. Pale overhead lights buzzed in rows above empty benches. Departure screens flickered with delays and route numbers in washed-out blue. The tiled floor inside the waiting hall held the chill of the night. Outside, idling buses sent soft clouds of exhaust into the cold air, and every sound seemed magnified. The hiss of pneumatic brakes, the click of a rolling suitcase wheel over cracked pavement, the distant crackle of a dispatcher's radio from behind the service window. People passed through the depot in a particular kind of silence at that hour. Overnight workers heading home, college students half asleep under hoodies, a mother with a toddler bundled in blankets, men in work boots carrying thermoses the size of baseball bats. Nobody wanted conversation. They wanted their route called, their seat, their stop, their morning to continue without complication. That was why nearly everyone noticed the Bobcat at once. It was standing on Platform 3 under the route sign for the eastbound commuter line. Not moving, not hiding, not darting away from the buses or the humans the way any sane wild animal should. It stood in the harsh fluorescent wash beside a steel bench, body narrow and tense, ears sharply tufted, coat patterned with soft spots and tawny gray bands that looked almost silver in the depot lighting. Not a huge adult. Young, lean, but unmistakably wild. The first passenger to see it was a bakery worker named Marisol Vega, who had just stepped outside with a paper cup of machine coffee and 2 hours of sleep behind her eyes. For a second, she thought someone had abandoned an exotic cat. Then it turned, and the shape of it, the stiff tail, the face, the ears, hit her all at once. She stopped so suddenly the coffee sloshed over her hand. What in the world? A college student near the vending machine followed her stare and actually took out one earbud. Within seconds, 3 people had noticed. Then 6. Then everyone within view of Platform 3 was staring at the same impossible scene. The Bobcat did not run. That was the first thing that made the air change. It simply stood there, looking not at the people, not at the nearest idling bus, but through the glass wall into the dispatch office. Then it looked down the platform, then back to the glass again, as if it were waiting for someone in particular to understand. Inside the depot office, dispatcher Alana Price was 3 hours into the kind of shift that flattened time. At 45, Alana had worked transit long enough to know that chaos rarely announced itself with proper warning. Usually it arrived disguised as something ordinary, a route mismatch, a radio dead spot, a passenger argument that was really a medical event, a driver who failed to check in because he had slid into a ditch 2 counties over. You learned to scan everything twice, and learn the shape of the unusual. Learn that fatigue made people miss what mattered. That morning, she was staring at a bank of route monitors with one hand wrapped around cold tea and the other moving between dispatch messages. 2 buses were running late from road construction. One overnight driver had called in sick. The surveillance feeds cycled through quiet platform views with the harmless monotony of all stations at dawn. Then the platform camera for Bay 3 froze for half a second on a shape that made no sense. Alana leaned closer. A bobcat, standing directly beneath the platform screen. She pushed back from her chair at once. "Tony," she called to the security guard dozing over paperwork near the side office. "Tell me I'm hallucinating." Tony stepped over, squinted at the monitor, and swore softly. "That is absolutely a bobcat." Most people, seeing wildlife in a transit depot, would assume the main issue was public safety. Alana did too at first. A wild predator near passengers meant lock the bay, move people indoors, call animal control. Simple. Then she looked again. The bobcat wasn't behaving like a cornered animal. It wasn't pacing for escape routes. It wasn't posturing. It wasn't crouching at the crowds or showing teeth or trying to get under buses. It kept returning to the same exact spot beneath the digital route display mounted above the bench on Bay 3. Every few seconds, it lifted its head toward the glass dispatch window, then turned and looked at the screen, then back again. Tony had already started toward the platform door when Alana stopped him. Wait, what? She pointed. Look at it. He did. And because he was not stupid, he stopped moving too. The bobcat took 3 steps along the platform, then came back to the screen. It rose slightly on its front paws as if trying to reach the base of the display column, then dropped down again. Then it looked at the dispatch window. Not random, Alana thought suddenly. Not random at all. Outside, passengers were retreating in scattered confusion. A man with a duffel bag cursed under his breath and changed platforms. A woman clutching a sleeping toddler backed into the waiting hall. 2 teenagers, against all reasonable instinct, had their phones out recording. Marisol, still holding her coffee, said to no one in particular, "It wants something." No one answered her, because nobody wanted to sound foolish by agreeing. Then the bay screen changed. The depot's public displays rotated automatically between departure information, service notices, and ad loops unless manually overridden from inside dispatch. At that moment, the Route 18 eastbound notice flickered off, flashed blue, then returned with a line of white text that did not belong there. Help, the words stayed on the screen for less than 2 seconds before the display glitched back to the route listing. On the platform, the bobcat sprang toward the base of the display pole and struck it once with a paw. Inside the office, Alana went cold all at once. Tony stared at her. "Did you do that?" "No." She was already at the keyboard. The platform display system was old enough to be temperamental, but not imaginative. It glitched, yes. It froze, yes. It cycled partial code sometimes after power flickers, but it did not type words on its own. Not plain English words. Not clean, centered, all caps help. Alana pulled the route log. Nothing. No manual input, no scheduled override. The display flickered once more on the monitor feed, then returned to the route header. The bobcat stayed beneath it, body tense, ears angled toward the base column where the wiring ran down into the concrete platform. Tony said what both of them were thinking. Somebody's messing with the sign. Alana was already moving. Or someone's under it. That possibility changed everything. She hit the emergency platform lock for Bay 3 so no passengers could be routed there, radioed the depot supervisor, called transit police, and grabbed the master key ring for the access panels. Tony moved toward the public hall, voice suddenly hard as he cleared bystanders away from the platform doors. "Everybody inside, now. No filming. Move." That last instruction had no effect whatsoever on the filming, but the tone got people moving. Marisol followed the crowd into the waiting hall, then stopped just inside the glass. Her bakery apron was still dusted with flour from the overnight shift. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands. She didn't know why she stayed, but she did. Something in the bobcat's posture, the fixity of it, the refusal to flee, the impossible way it kept holding its ground beneath that screen, had lodged under her skin. The bobcat turned again toward the dispatch window. The screen above it flickered. "Help." This time, the words stayed up long enough for half the waiting hall to gasp. Then the letters broke into static and vanished. "Holy God," someone whispered. Alana reached the service corridor that ran behind the platform displays and knelt at the electrical cabinet servicing Bay 3. Old wiring conduits, network patch lines, access junctions, everything for that side of the depot fed through a locked panel set low in the wall behind the public benches. She unlocked it fast, expecting maybe a loose cable, a prank device, some feral short. Instead, she heard something. Not electrical buzzing, breathing, faint, human. She froze. Tony, coming up behind her, saw the change in her face. "What?" Alana lifted one hand for silence. There it was again, a shallow, strained inhale from somewhere behind the panel wall. Then a weak scrape. Tony swore and immediately keyed his shoulder radio. "Possible trapped person behind Bay 3 display wall. Repeat, possible trapped person." Outside, the bobcat went absolutely still. The back service corridor behind the display line was narrow and ugly, a forgotten maintenance channel running beneath the platform, cladding and wiring risers. Most of it was too tight for a person to use except during panel access work, and even then only from designated openings. But there were dead spaces where utility lines and foundation gaps created crawl-sized cavities between the public display columns and the old concrete wall of the original terminal build. If someone had gotten into one of those spaces and couldn't get back out, they could be hidden from public view by less than 2 feet of steel, plastic, and advertising panel. Alana tore open the second latch and pulled the panel wider. A phone screen glowed from inside the darkness. Cracked, dirty, barely lit. And on it, in a message draft window, one word: help. The dispatcher's stomach turned over. Someone was back there. Someone had been trying to use the display wiring, or NFC service panel, or any electronic interference they could reach to trigger visible text on the base screen. And the Bobcat had been standing over the exact spot. Transit police and EMS arrived within minutes, though to the people in the waiting hall it felt much longer. The station had shifted from confusion to a charged, breathless dread. Passengers clustered behind the interior glass. Drivers stood in reflective vests near the route doors. Tony had cleared Bay 3 completely, and even the buses approaching the platform were being waved to hold farther out. The Bobcat still had not left. It moved only enough to keep itself between the platform edge and the base of the display, then retreated a few feet when responders approached, then came back again, as if proximity mattered, but escape mattered less. Officer Dana Holt from Transit Police took control of the scene quickly. She was compact, blunt, and efficient, the kind of person whose calm came with steel edges. She listened to Alana's summary, glanced at the phone glowing inside the cavity, and immediately ordered fire rescue for a confined space extraction. "Do we know who it is?" she asked. Alana shook her head. "Not yet." The phone inside the wall was too deep to reach by hand through the service panel opening. Someone had gotten trapped beyond the first utility gap, likely behind a collapsed maintenance plate or fallen conduit shelf. The breathing was weak but regular. There was no room to simply crawl in without risking further collapse or pinning. Fire rescue needed to open the side cladding. Outside, the Bobcat rose onto the bench once, looked directly through the glass at the responders, then turned back toward the wall. Marisol saw it and whispered almost to herself, "It stayed here all this time." Nobody answered. They didn't have to. When fire rescue arrived, they moved fast. Portable shields went up. Bay 3 was isolated fully. A paramedic team staged behind the service corridor. One technician traced the service schematic, while another checked the panel anchors. Dana Holt asked the question everyone had somehow avoided until then. "How long has this person been back there?" Alana looked at the first help display in her mind, the Bobcat already waiting under it, the weakness in the breathing behind the panel. "Long enough to be in trouble." The extraction began with cutting away the side access cladding from the service corridor wall. Old rivets screamed. Dust drifted. Wiring was held back and capped. The cavity behind Bay 3 opened inch by inch, revealing insulation, conduit, trash blown into dead space over years, and finally the shape of a human arm. A man, young, maybe 20, wedged between a fallen maintenance ladder section and a pipe chase, twisted in a way that made one firefighter mutter a curse before catching himself. His face was gray with exhaustion. One leg was pinned. Blood had dried along his hairline. In one hand, still clutched loosely against his chest, was the cracked phone. The screen was still on the message draft. "Help!" The paramedic dropped to his knees. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved. No sound came out. Later they would piece together what had happened. He was a contract electronics tech named Owen Reed, 22, brought in on an overnight maintenance subcontract no one at the depot desk had been fully briefed on because the work order had been routed through a third-party facilities vendor. Sometime after 2 a.m., he had opened the Bay 3 access line to trace a signal fault in the display panel. A degraded internal support shelf gave way beneath him. He fell into the dead utility cavity, hit his head, and became pinned when a loose ladder section and conduit bracket shifted down over his leg. His radio had broken on impact. His calls for help went unheard over bus noise and mechanical cycling. But his phone had survived, barely. No service in the cavity, no clean signal out. Yet the display wiring harness for Bay 3 ran close enough that by stripping back a loosened access junction and physically bridging the wrong contacts with the phone's charging lead, and exposed metal from the maintenance probe clipped to his belt, He had managed to force short text injections onto the malfunctioning route display. Not enough for conversation, just enough for one word. Help. The only problem was that nobody saw the first few glitches as meaning anything. Nobody except, somehow, the bobcat. Fire rescue stabilized Owen's leg, cut the bent ladder section, and slid him onto a narrow extraction board. The work took 17 minutes. The waiting hall lived every second of it through fragments, shouted tool names, the medic calling for oxygen, the metallic scream of fasteners. The kind of silence that comes only when strangers collectively decide to hold their breath for someone they do not know. And through all of that, the bobcat remained on platform 3. Not underfoot, not in the way, just there, visible, present, refusing to vanish into the rail yard weeds or the service lane shadows until the stretcher finally emerged from the side access gap. That was when it changed. Owen came out pale, shaking, and conscious enough to try to speak through the oxygen mask. The moment the paramedics wheeled him past the platform edge toward the ambulance corridor, the bobcat stepped down from the bench. For the first time since anyone had seen it, its body loosened. Not fully. It was still wild, still ready. But something in the fixed tension had gone out of it. It looked once at the stretcher, then once at the base screen. Then it turned and trotted down the far end of platform 3, slipped between two maintenance barriers, and disappeared into the dark strip of brush beyond the depot fence before anyone could move to stop it. Marisol, still holding the empty coffee cup she had forgotten to throw away an hour earlier, felt tears prick her eyes so suddenly it embarrassed her. Tony saw her expression and said quietly, "Yeah, same." The rest of the morning at North Valley Bus Depot went off script completely. Buses were rerouted. Bay 3 remained closed behind yellow tape. Transit supervisors arrived in escalating waves of confusion and paperwork. The facilities contractor responsible for Owen's assignment was contacted in tones that made lawsuits feel inevitable. Passengers missed departures and, for once, complained only mildly because everybody wanted to ask the same question instead. Where did the bobcat come from? Alana could not answer that. The depot bordered a tangle of drainage lots, weeded service roads, and abandoned rail spurs leading toward the creek corridor outside town. Wildlife passed through stranger urban edges than people realized. Coyotes were seen near the lot dumpsters some winters. A fox had once denned under a retired shuttle trailer, but a bobcat standing on a bus platform at dawn, holding position beneath a glitching sign until someone understood the word on the screen, that was different. By noon, the story had escaped into the city. A commuter had posted a blurry photo of the bobcat under the Bay 3 sign. Someone else uploaded video of the help glitch from the waiting hall. Local news sites grabbed it within the hour. The headline writing was predictably terrible. Mystery bobcat leads to depot rescue. Wild cat stuns morning commuters. The viral version simplified the story into something almost magical, as if the animal had read English and summoned first responders. Alana hated that framing immediately. "It didn't read the screen," she told a reporter who cornered her near the employee lot. "It knew something was wrong there. It stayed. That's enough." But of course, the magical version spread fastest. At the hospital, Owen regained enough strength that evening to answer questions clearly. He remembered falling, remembered hitting the metal edge, remembered trying the radio and getting nothing, remembered the suffocating panic of realizing he could hear buses and people, but no one could hear him. He remembered using the phone flashlight until the battery dipped, remembered seeing the maintenance junction close enough to reach and trying anything he could think of. The help text had worked once, then not, then once again. He had no idea if anyone had noticed. Then, sometime before dawn, he heard something outside the wall, scratching, pacing, a low, wild sound. He thought he was hallucinating. "I kept hearing it above me," he told Dana Holt later from the hospital bed, voice still rough. "Like an animal on the platform. Every time I hit the contacts and the sign glitched, it would move. I swear it stayed there." Dana did not tell him that dozens of people could confirm exactly that. She just nodded and wrote it down. The next week changed things at the depot in small but permanent ways. Bay 3's access systems were redesigned. Vendor oversight got less sloppy overnight. Maintenance clearance rules were rewritten so no lone subcontractor could work isolated platform infrastructure without direct check-in. The City Transit Board, under uncomfortable media attention, approved overdue structural inspections for all platform service cavities. The fluorescent-lit anonymity of the depot had been broken by one trapped young man, one malfunctioning screen, and one wild animal stubborn enough to stay visible where people could no longer ignore it. As for the bobcat, sightings came in for days. A sanitation crew member claimed to have seen it near the drainage canal west of the depot. A bus driver swore he spotted the same young cat sitting on a retaining wall by the freight yard at sunrise. A rail worker reported tracks near a break in the perimeter fence line leading toward the brushy creek bed. No one ever proved any of it. Alana did not especially care to. For her, the important part had already happened. A week after the rescue, she visited Owen in the rehab wing, where his leg was set and pinned but expected to heal. He looked startlingly young, without the grime and blood of the depot wall space, younger still when embarrassed by attention. "I owe you," he said. She shook her head. "You owe your weird wiring trick." He smiled faintly. "And the bobcat." That made them both quiet. Finally, Owen said, "Do you think it knew?" Alana thought of the platform under white light, the fixed body, the gaze from screen to window, window to screen, the refusal to leave. "I think it knew something there needed attention," she said. "Maybe that's all. Maybe that's more than enough." He looked down at his hands. "I kept thinking if I could just get one person to stop and really look." She didn't tell him how many people had looked without seeing. She only said, "You did." A month later, the Transit Board held a painfully official ceremony to honor staff response protocols and maintenance reform, which was exactly as dry as it sounds. There was a plaque no one wanted. There were remarks about vigilance and infrastructure review. Tony wore a tie he despised. Alana stood under fluorescent lights wishing she were anywhere else. Then someone from operations unveiled a small addition near the staff break room bulletin board. Not a plaque. A printed photo. Blurry, grainy, obviously captured from a platform security still, but clear enough to show the bobcat on Bay 3 under the platform screen, ears up, body taut, standing exactly where help had almost gone unseen. No caption, no slogan. It didn't need one. Commuters eventually stopped asking about the story. Bay 3 reopened. Buses ran late, early, full, empty, as they always had. The depot regained its usual rhythm of impatience and routine. But for the people who were there that morning, the place never looked quite the same. Marisol still bought coffee before dawn shifts, but now she always glanced first through the glass toward the platforms. Tony checked the service corridor camera feed with more attention than policy required. Dana Holt made sure her officers no longer dismissed any weird report from transit staff as a nuisance call. And Alana, every time a platform monitor flickered unexpectedly, felt her pulse kick before her training caught up. Because once, before sunrise, when the depot was full of tired strangers and nobody wanted complication, a bobcat stood on the bus platform and would not leave. Then a dispatcher finally looked closely enough at the screen to understand what someone trapped behind the wall had been trying to say. And because the wild things stayed visible long enough, one human life did not disappear into the machinery of an ordinary morning.